She was asleep in row 12, but when the captain yelled, "Is there a pilot?" It went dark. The plane was in the air, cruising at 20,000 feet, when silence broke like glass. In the dimly lit cabin, a lone figure snuggled deep under her grandmother's quilt stirred, oblivious to the swirling chaos above her. The engines droned a soothing lullaby, but it was false comfort, masking a horror that was about to unfold. It pierced the air, raw and unsettling, shattering any trace of serenity like a bolt of lightning. "Is there a pilot?" The captain's voice echoed through the cockpit, frantic and urgent. The word pilot sent ice-cold shivers down the spines of the passengers, bringing their sleepy heads in unison to the reality of their precarious situation. Their eyes fluttered open. A bizarre sight met them. People in the rows ahead were flinging their seatbelts off, panic flickering across their faces like a flickering bulb. Sweat trickled down their brows, and whispers turned into shrieks, rising as if carried by some unseen wind. Everyone turned to the front, expecting to see a captain clutching the yoke, but the cockpit door was ominously shut. It looked like a scene from some outlandish disaster movie, a surreal twist in their journey that shouldn't be happening at all. A strange man in a patterned shirt was yelling something about emergency exits, but it made no sense. There was a heavy tension, a pressing weight in the air, as the flight attendants exchanged worried glances. Were they trained for this? With every second, the atmosphere thickened. It felt tangible, wrapping around the passengers like a suffocating blanket. Row 12, where the girl was still sleeping, became an island of eerie calm amid the chaos. The young boy screamed, "We're going to crash!" And suddenly, the fear intensified. Inside the cabin, people began to gasp, exchanging quick, terrified looks, their breaths quickening. Inspiration turned into dread. Hope collided with sheer panic. The flight attendants moved like frantic shadows, trying to calm the storm brewing around them, yet their words fell flat. Darkness seemed to swallow the overhead lights. An ominous hum filled the cabin, pulsating through their bones like a lo-fi drum. Then came the sounds: metal grinding, creaking, the terrifying whisper of something sinister lurking just outside the walls of the plane. The passengers shifted in their seats, fingers gripping armrests, knuckles white. It felt like they were all strapped into some monstrous carnival ride. Only this was no funfair. This was life or death. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Then, just as the fear reached its pinnacle, the captain's voice broke through the chaos again, raw, almost pleading. "Everyone, brace for impact." What did that mean? The darkness of uncertainty descended fully. The plane tilted ever so slightly, like a bird caught in a crosswind, and in that moment, a collective gasp rose from the passengers, a mix of dread and disbelief. Everything hung in the balance. Was there truly a pilot on board? As the sound of the engines faltered into an agonizing silence, the only thought that crossed many minds was simple yet terrifying. Would anyone walk away from this? The cabin held its breath, a palpable tension suffocating the air. Buckled in, passengers could feel the shudder of the plane cutting through the stillness, every creak of metal echoing the dread pooling in their stomachs. The girl in row 12, finally roused by the shouting, blinked against the dim light and looked around, confused. She could sense the fear. It draped over her like that heavy quilt, but she didn't understand it. Not yet. Is there anyone who can fly this plane? The captain's voice quavered, torn between authority and sheer desperation. It seemed to ricochet around the cramped cabin, bouncing off panicked faces. The flight attendants scrambled, their calm facade crumbling, replaced by a frantic need for order that felt increasingly futile. One woman clutched her badge as if it could somehow lend her strength. "I know how to fly," shouted a bold passenger from the back. He leapt to his feet, emotions boiling over, desperation in his eyes. "I have a license. I can help." The murmurs of disbelief echoed through the rows. Was it a joke? They couldn't be serious. No one in their right mind would let an amateur take the controls of a plane spiraling toward a disaster. But the man pushed forward, leaving the comfort of the familiar seats behind. The girl watched, her heart racing, trying to focus. She could barely comprehend the crisis blooming around her and the worry etched across her mother's face. But her instincts kicked in. She could feel it, the urgency clawed at her, a sharp reminder that something was terribly wrong. The man in the back was suddenly a beacon of courage amid the despair. He rapped his knuckles against the cockpit door, shouting to be let in. A wave of dizzying thoughts cascaded through her. What if everything turned out okay? What if this man made it worse? The fear pulsating in the cabin warred with flickers of hope. The mix felt like a live wire. Suddenly, the jolt came again, a hard tilt that threw everyone to one side. Screams erupted, a chaotic symphony of terror filling the void. The overhead compartments rattled violently, and a few bags tumbled free, spilling personal items across the aisle. One woman sobbed, clutching a small child. Her hands trembled, too, the weight of the moment crashing down on them all. "Get back in your seats," shouted one of the flight attendants, her voice cracking. "Please, everyone, get buckled." But the panic was a hurricane now, and no words could tame it. People surged to their feet, each person driven by instinct. "Safety systems be damned." The pilot's voice broke in again, this time trembling. "We're going to try to regain control, but we need to follow protocol. Please listen." The words hung heavily in the cabin, entangled with dread. Control? What did that even mean now? Had he given up? As the young girl gripped the arms of her seat, the realization hit her, the possibility that there may not be a way out. It was a crushing thought. She looked over at her mother, who was pale as a ghost, mouth moving in prayer. Rows 11 and 13 were a scene of panic, but row 12 remained her sanctuary, a rickety lifeboat on a raging sea. Then, as everything started to calm for a split second, a deafening boom resonated through the fuselage. The plane shook violently, and the lights flickered back to life, casting an eerie glow over the frenzied cabin. Gasps of disbelief echoed. Was it help or harm? Before they could process, the cockpit door swung open. A figure stumbled out, drenched in perspiration, eyes wide and terrified. The room fell silent. "Everyone stop!" The captain gasped, staggering. "We have a problem." Would it be the last opportunity for order before chaos reigned again? What lay ahead was unknown, but the flicker of hope had faded. Now it was replaced by an unsettling urge to discover what would happen next. The cabin's tension shifted like thick fog as the captain's words hung ominously in the air. Eyes darted anxiously from the captain to the cockpit and back. There was that brief moment, a heartbeat of hope before it faded, evaporating in the face of sobering dread. Everybody sensed it, the murmur of a greater threat looming. "Sir, what do you mean we have a problem?" The bold man from the back, still risking everything by pressing forward, framed a question that hung like a lead weight. The captain staggered, trying to reclaim his breath. "The autopilot is down. The main systems are compromised. We can't stabilize the plane. We need to land fast." Panic punctuated his voice, a frantic pitch that overpowered even the howls of turbulence. Murmurs erupted again, then faded as shock took over. The girl felt the world closing in. The truth began to sink in. They were flying blind, and hope was slipping like sand through their fingers. "Can you fly?" The bold passenger's voice was louder now, demanding answers. "What about evacuating everyone? Should we brace for impact?" Evacuating would be impossible mid-flight. The captain snapped, frustration simmering beneath his fear. He stepped back toward the cockpit, beckoning with a shaken hand. "We need structure. You can't just..." The girl, still riveted in her seat, watched it unfold. The cabin was a theater of dread. Families gripping each other with white-knuckled hands, friends whispering to each other what could come next. The weight of shared fear cast a heavy shoulder over them all. She leaned into her mom, her small heart racing. The familiar scent of her mother's perfume drifted in the air, a bitter contrast to the chaos. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking with dread. "Shoo, sweetheart, just listen," her mother murmured, eyes shining with unshed tears. "We're going to be okay." But even she could hear the uncertainty in her own words. Then, a chilling sound reverberated through the cabin, the metal groaning, like a beast troubled in its slumber. The plane tilted sharply again, and the girl felt weightlessness grip her stomach, a terrifying lurch. Around her, adults screamed and children cried, voices rising in an eerie cacophony that intertwined with the roar of the engines now sputtering ominously. Hope stretched thin, fraying at the edges. "Get back!" Someone shouted as groups of people made a desperate charge toward the front, their instinct to flee contradicting the captain's orders. "We need to help." As they scrambled, the girl caught sight of the young man at the back tearing open an emergency exit. The whoosh of air howled into the cabin, turning the chaos into a nightmare of a different kind. "Stop!" A flight attendant screamed, her desperation tangible, but it was too late. A wave of air surged through the plane, threatening to pull anyone near toward the gaping chasm of open sky. The girl wanted to close her eyes, to shut out the ravenous fear clawing at everyone around her. But she couldn't. She focused on her mother's face, the last island of sanity in a turbulent sea of terror. "Mom, what if we crash?" she whimpered, gripping her arm. Her mother inhaled sharply, and there was a moment of silence too still. "We need to believe," she said, her eyes glistening with fierce resolve. "We have to believe there's a way through this." But just then, another violent jolt rocked the plane. Suddenly, the lights flickered and dimmed, plummeting the cabin into darkness. Gasps echoed, but that suffocating quiet that followed made the shadows loom larger. And in that moment of dread, clarity hit. The flight attendants were rushing back toward their seats like marionettes on frayed strings, yet in the void, a sinister whisper cut through the panic. "We're not coming down, not like this," the girl's heart thundered. With each beat, a thought pulsed. Something had to give. But what? Under the weight of the deepening silence, questions multiplied. Who would make the next move? What choices lay ahead? "Hold on tight," the captain shouted, voice strained. "Get ready for anything." What awaited them in that abyss of darkness? She couldn't fathom, but the end wasn't at all clear. Could either brave souls or options emerge from this torment? Or was their fate already sealed in the storm that loomed ahead? The darkness engulfed the cabin like a shroud, suffocating the last bits of hope. Fear gripped the girl's heart as she desperately tried to focus on her mother's reassuring presence. But the words felt distant, as if they were echoing through a tunnel. "Mom, I can't see. I can't." Her voice trembled as panic clawed at her throat. "Stay close to me, sweetheart," her mother urged, squeezing her hand tightly, grounding her in the chaos. But the sound of frantic footsteps shuffled around them, punctuated by the sharp inhale of strangers panicking, a chorus of mounting dread. "Why isn't anybody doing anything?" someone yelled, their voice rising over the din. "Just sit down. You're making it worse." Another passenger screamed, desperation fueling their anger. The once secure atmosphere felt like it had been flung into a storm, and every soul seemed to be fighting for survival in different ways. Suddenly, the cabin was illuminated by flickering emergency lights, casting eerie shadows that danced on the terrified faces around her. The girl saw them embrace, mothers clinging to children, couples clutching each other, all seekers of solace in imminent peril. "Listen," the captain's voice cut through the commotion. "We're stabilizing. Buckle in." His tone was still frantic, but there was a touch of urgency that reached them through the fog of fear. "Stabilizing? How?" The same bold voice pressed again, this time filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You said the systems were down. Inverted controls." "I'm fighting it manually," the captain shouted, voice steadying like a coiling spring preparing to consume the tension. "But I can't keep it up for long. We need someone in the cockpit now." That voice again, haunting in its intensity, floated through the cabin like a ghost. "Who can fly this thing?" Dread pooled in the girl's stomach. The reality seeped in. This wasn't just turbulence. This was chaos, and the threat of gravity weighed heavily on their souls. Then, a flight attendant, wide-eyed and frantic, dashed toward the front before crashing down beside her seat. "What do you want us to do?" she spluttered, hands trembling. "Help me stabilize the cabin," the captain yelled, determination snapping in his tone. "We need to brace for turbulence and keep people calm." In that moment, a flicker of order returned, but the tension never truly eased. The smell of sweat and anxiety mixed with the fabric of uncertainty. The girl watched as the flight attendants moved like a well-practiced drill, trying to anchor chaos and fear without the tools they once relied upon. But fear thrives in silence. And just then, the cabin plunged into another gut-wrenching drop, as if the earth had inhaled sharply. "Brace," the captain warned, and screams erupted as bodies were flung forward. The girl felt her mother's grip slip before she propelled into the seat in front of her, the sound of fabric tearing in the swirl of panic around them. "Mom," she screamed, the stone in her heart feeling heavier. "I'm here. Just hold on." Her mother forced the words through labored breaths, her face showing determination even in terrifying turmoil. And then, a series of loud thuds sounded from the back of the cabin. A group of strong voices, men rushing forward, reeking of defiance. "We're taking charge," one of them shouted. "We can do this. We will land." The girl felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Who were these men? Did they know how to fly? Would their bravery save them, or would it push them further into the abyss? The emergency exits, now haunting reminders of desperation, loomed close. In that moment, the girl's mind stumbled over dark thoughts. Was escape still a possibility? Then a sudden bright light flickered above, a spark igniting hope once more. "Stabilizing," the captain shouted again with newfound vigor. "But we still need a pilot. Is there anyone?" The cabin quieted, as if inviting a moment for clarity. The question hung like a blade poised to drop. What would it take to chase the shadows away? Would bravery find its way through despair? As the lights flickered again, the girl caught a glimpse of determination in her mother's eyes, but what path remained? And who would take the next step into the dark? The girl's heart raced as silence blanketed the cabin, a heavy pause before the storm of noise that followed. Her intuition pricked at her like tiny needles. The tension was electric. Every passenger shifted, their collective breaths hitching as they weighed the captain's words. What if one of us, a man's voice trembled, the idea hanging in the air, unformed yet pregnant with anxiety. Who could possibly step up to that? Someone snapped back, panic creeping into their tone. Frustration sparked among the crowd, igniting fear like a match to dry tinder. The girl's gaze darted around in search of her mother. In the dim light, all she could see was the outline of her figure. Was she hurt? She struggled to hear the solid rhythm of her mother's breaths above the worried murmurs. "Mom," she called again, voice barely holding together. "I need you. Stay put." Her mother's voice shot back, filled with urgency. "I'm right here." But the older woman's reply only deepened the girl's dread. How could she stay put when everything felt so incredibly uncertain, so dangerously on edge? Suddenly, the cabin lurched again, this time deeper, an ominous kind of plummet that sent stomachs into freefall. The flickering lights reflected twisted shadows, and her heart raced at the sensation of being untethered in an open sky. She clutched the edge of her seat, knuckles white, desperate to anchor herself to something. Anything. In that moment, a voice cut through again, louder, bolder. "I can fly." A man stepped forward defiantly, blonde hair tousled and eyes alight with resolve. He wasn't just any passenger. He was a former military pilot. "Just tell me what to do." The cabin exploded with a mix of disbelief and strained hope. Could this be a chance? The girl felt a flicker of something in her chest, a whisper of life amidst terror. "Are you sure?" A flight attendant interjected, her voice shaking despite attempting to bring order. "You need to be careful. The systems. I know what I'm doing," he yelled, cutting off the attendant. "Just let me in there." The captain's voice boomed, directing the chaos. "Take a seat. We don't have time for questions." As the man turned to the cockpit, the girl clutched her mother's hand again. "What if he can't do it?" "We have to hope," her mother said, squeezing back. "It's all we have." Voices around them began to murmur, a surreal sense of united desperation rising in the air. There was a shared understanding. Their survival was dependent on them working together, on trusting each other amidst the looming uncertainty. But as the man clambered into the cockpit, the cabin tilted again, throwing bodies against each other. The girl gasped as the lights suddenly dimmed, plunging them deeper into shadow. Panic erupted anew as the emergency lights flickered and buzzed, casting chaotic glints over wide, frightened eyes. "What is happening?" Someone screamed, and another voice cried, "We can't do this." The girl pressed her face against the cool window, her breath misting the glass. Outside, she by the chaos of the storm still raging beyond. The clouds formed dreadful shapes against the night sky, writhing like creatures intent on swallowing them whole. Then came another lurch, deeper, more furious. Prepare for impact. The captain's warning sliced through the noise, a cold knife that cut straight to the heart. That was it. All hope hung in the fragility of that one moment as the plane quaked beneath their feet. And in the very next instant darkness fell like a heavy curtain, swallowing the cabin whole. The girl's mind raced to find her mother. She grasped out wildly, fingers trembling, heart hammering. Was this truly the end? Or was there still a flicker of light waiting to break through the consuming darkness? As silence enveloped them, her mind echoed the same word as the captain's. What now? The girl was enveloped in darkness, a suffocating blanket that pressed against her senses. The silence was deafening but not absolute. She could hear the sharp breaths of frightened passengers and feel the heartbeat of panic pulsing like a warning light. "Mom," she shouted again, desperation spilling from her lips. The calm presence of her mother felt so far away now. Her heart raced like a wild bird in a cage, flying headlong into the bars. For a moment, the cabin was a world unto itself, a bubble of fear and uncertainty, suspended in time. Shadows shifted as people groped through the blackness, seeking comfort or clarity in the unknown. "Someone, say something," a woman cried, her voice slicing through the tension, fueled by sheer terror. I can't just wait here." The girl held on to that. It reminded her of the school play where she was tasked with delivering the punchline, only this wasn't a joke, and she wasn't sure if her light-hearted nature could endure the heaviness of this moment. Then, the lights sputtered back to life, erratic flashes beating against the darkness like a confused pulse. Her immediate relief was like a swift gust of wind, but it was followed by the hideous reality of the scene that lay before her. Amidst the sea of disturbed faces, she caught a glimpse of the pilot emerging from the cockpit, pale and shaken. There are serious issues," he stammered, every word laced with gravity. Fear knitted itself deeper into her gut. "We might be losing control." The former pilot still inside the cockpit appeared, his brow furrowed, and voice steady against the chaos. "We need to stabilize the altitude," he declared, his courage igniting a flicker of hope, yet the anxiety in his eyes spoke of the gravity of their situation. "Catch me up to speed, Captain." "Hang on." The captain shoved aside panic, channeling the little control he had left. Instruments reported another violent jolt rocked the aircraft. The girl felt her body press into the seat, a raw, visceral reminder of her situation. Oxygen masks dropped from the compartments above, swaying like pendulums of fate. She reached for her mother, who had finally made her way to her side, but the sudden chaos blurred her vision. "We have to stay calm," her mother shouted over the noise as she secured her own mask, the plastic crinkling like haunted whispers in the air. "Put on your mask." Frantic, the girl tugged at the mask, her fingers trembling as she fought to strap it in place. A heady rush filled her lungs, but it barely quelled the spiraling panic in her mind. She could hear murmurs morphing into shouts, a swell of collective fear threatening to drown them all in that swirl of confusion. She spotted the former pilot hunched over the control panel, throwing switches and fidgeting with knobs. His knuckles were white from tension. "Steady now. I need all eyes in this cabin on me." His command broke through the fray, anchoring them. "Are you sure you can do this?" Someone yelled, their voice a shrill edge of despair. The man turned sharply, adrenaline coursing through him as he met their gaze with unwavering intensity. "We have to take back control together." Then, as if the universe was flipping a switch, the lights above them flickered again, plunging the cabin into dim, flickering uncertainty. The darkness rushed back, wrapping around the girl like a thief stealing slivers of hope. "Can't we just land?" She couldn't help but voice the question that gripped everyone's thoughts, her voice shaking like the plane's frame. A loud crackle echoed through the cabin. "Mayday! We may lose power." The captain's voice reverberated, holding the weight of their fate in every syllable. Fear rippled through the crowd like cold water. The girl tightened her grip on the armrest, feeling the collective tension rise as every passenger braced for the unknown. In that moment of impending doom, she faced the truth, echoing in the back of her mind, what if this would be the last moment they all shared together? Just as the void seemed poised to consume them, a faint green glow broke through the dark, illuminating the cockpit. Yes, that's it. The former pilot's voice rang out, a spear of determination weaving through the dread. But at that instant, the girl realized, could the light be a false dawn? The darkness held secrets, and not all of them were ready to be discovered. Brace yourselves, the captain shouted, but the girl's heart sank as new fear wormed its way inside. Because somewhere, lurking in the shadows, something waited to be unleashed. What had they truly unleashed? The cabin shuddered like a wounded animal. The girl could feel the plane lurch beneath her, a beast thrashing against an unseen grip around its throat. The chaotic hum of voices morphed into a single chorus of dread. She could hardly think, her mind flooded with images of what might happen next. Stay calm. Her mother's voice broke through, strong yet trembling. But even her resolve was frayed, the lines of fear drawn tight across her face. With the soft glow flickering from the cockpit, the former pilot moved swiftly, fingers darting over instruments like they were illicit secrets begging for disclosure. The girl tried to focus on him, resisting the pull of panic rising like bile. Who was he? What if he couldn't save them? The captain's voice cracked, echoing in the small space. We need to find another way to stabilize the plane. If anyone in here has flight experience, a heavy gasp seared through the cabin, cutting off his words. A man stood, unsteady, raising both hands. I used to fly small planes. I can help. His eyes were wide, the pupils tiny pinpricks against the whites, but there was an ember of courage sparking in his chest. Get up here. The former pilot barked, not missing a beat. We'll need all the help we can get. Before the girl could react, the row of seats nearby erupted in chaos. People were scrambling, moving to get a better look, pushing against one another in desperate urgency. She felt trapped, as if a tidal wave was surging toward them, and no one knew which way to dive. Her mother squeezed her hand tightly, steadying her. We'll be okay, honey. Trust the people who know what they're doing. But trust was a fragile thing, shattering under the weight of fear. Another jolt hurled the plane toward the left, and it felt as if they were breaking the very fabric of the sky. The girl closed her eyes, taking deep, shuddering breaths, to block out the screams and the clanging of metal against itself. On the count of 3, the former pilot commanded, voice booming through the cabin like battle drums. We will engage the manual control together. 1, 2. The girl opened her eyes just in time to witness the resignation flash across her mother's face, a look of raw vulnerability that wrenched at her heart. Was this fear or acceptance? She couldn't tell. 3. The noise exploded, a cacophony of shouts, mechanical whirs, and the ominous rumble of impending doom. Suddenly, the cockpit erupted with red lights, casting the shadow of panic deep across the cabin. Alarms blared, crude and unapologetic. No, no, no. The captain shouted, frustration igniting his words. Not now. The young girl's heart hammered in her chest, the rhythm of her dread syncing with the unsettling beeping that filled the air. They were losing it, all of it. Power, control, hoped in that heartbeat of reality. The true darkness crept in, seeping out from corners of the cabin and lurking behind the eyes of her fellow passengers. It was no longer just the fear of death, it was the threat of something worse. Something unknown loomed, clawing at the edges, mixing with the static shock of the despair that hung thickly in the air. What is happening? She whispered, her voice quiet but startled, echoing the thoughts of everyone around her. Her mother, too stunned to reply, could only stare ahead, her eyes distant. Just then, a scratchy voice crackled over the intercom. Mayday! Mayday! We are losing altitude. The static cut abruptly, replaced by chilling silence. Everything froze, and, in that stillness, a low growl erupted from the bowels of the plane, resonating like an ancient beast awakening from slumber. With dread spilling like ink across the canvas of her mind, the girl gasped. What terror lurked beneath their flight? There was something that wasn't supposed to be stirred. The dim light flickered, dimming even further, as voices faded into disarray and a dark mist rolled in. What had they really awakened? The growl rattled through the cabin, a visceral sound that shook bones and nerves alike. Anxiety pulsed in the air, feeding off the darkness that crept like a predator. The girl clutched her mother's hand tighter, her small fingers digging into the tenderness of her palm, yet offering no comfort. Instead, it was her mother who trembled, a shiver running through her body, the warmth escaping. "Mom, what is happening?" The girl squeaked, desperate for an answer she knew deep down wouldn't come. Her mother turned slowly, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know, darling. Just stay close." The words felt hollow, the reassurance slipping like sand through fingers. The former pilot and the man with prior flying experience had wrestled their way into the cockpit. Voices contorted into frantic pleas and commands, blending into a perfect storm of noise. "We need altitude. Pull up," the former pilot shouted, urgency igniting every syllable. The girl pressed against her seat, mind racing with fragmented thoughts. What about the people in the back? What if they needed help? She could feel the despair mounting, each heartbeat pushing her toward an unbearable reality. What if they didn't make it? The air grew heavier, weighted down by an unseen pressure. A woman a few rows ahead wailed, the sound piercing the gathered dread like a needle through skin. "My baby! My baby!" She clutched a tiny, pink blanket, her eyes wild and frantically searching. "Shut up!" A man barked, his voice thick with resources that had long since run dry. "We're not going to die in here, damn it." The cabin swayed again, more violently this time, as the girl's stomach lurched. Hands flew up, old patterns of safety abandoned as panic gripped them like a vice. The shadow of something dark loomed taller than life in her mind, whispering sweetly yet malevolently. "Listen," the former pilot's voice echoed, cutting through the clamor. "Everyone listen. We may have something down here." He paused, letting the confusion settle like dust. "What do you mean?" The man who introduced himself as a pilot demanded. "It's just turbulence. We can fix it." The pilot's gaze was steely now, piercing through the chaos. "No, this is different. It feels like we're being pulled, like something in the engine." Before he could finish, another howl tore through the cabin. This time, it was higher, shriller, a cry of something trapped, something malevolent. The girl's heart quickened, fear now tangible, clawing up her throat. The lights flickered once more. The cabin plunged into a shadowy gloom dotted by frantic, fading reds. Outside, clouds raced by, a blur of darkness against the impossibility of the sky. Suddenly, the intercom crackled back to life, a barely audible voice cutting through the tense silence. "Emergency procedures, prepare for impact." The girl's breath hitched. "Impact?" The words echoed in her mind, and all she could see were faces twisted with terror, eyes wide as saucers. "Get the seatbelts on," the former pilot barked, his authority breaking through the trepidation. The girl's mother wrapped her arms around her, her body acting as a shield against whatever horrors lay ahead. "Mom, I'm scared." The girl's voice was small, but the grip of panic made it resonate through the cabin like thunder. "Me too," her mother whispered back, voice thick. "But listen, we're going to be okay. I promise." But as the growls morphed into anguished shrieks echoing through the plane, and the cabin became a cacophony of terror, the girl's heart sank. No one was sure of anything anymore. The cabin lights flickered violently, then went black. Silence enveloped them, heavy and absolute. Then, a low rumble rolled underneath, different from the growl. Something was moving beneath them, an unseen force stirring in the belly of the beast. "Brace yourselves," the former pilot yelled before darkness consumed everything. And through that void, the girl heard her own thoughts, mingling with the chaos, screaming, begging. What had they truly unleashed? Indistinct murmurs filled the void, a collective breath held tight in the darkness. The air was thick with uncertainty, the cabin's once familiar lines now blurred into an impenetrable gloom. A heartbeat echoed, a solitary reminder they were all still alive, yet the tension pulled tight like a wire ready to snap. Then, without warning, a harsh light burst forth, slicing through the black like a bolt of lightning. It illuminated the panicked expressions of the passengers' wide eyes glistening with fear, mouths agape in silent screams. They were fish caught in a net, every soul thrashing against the same invisible force. "Everyone, remain calm." The former pilot's voice boomed, asserting authority amidst chaos, but the effectiveness of his words drowned in panic. The lights flickered again, strobing between light and darkness, creating an eerie dance that left the girl's head spinning. "Mom, I can't breathe," she gasped, her chest tightening under the weight of the rising dread. Every breath felt like a battle, and the sound of her own heartbeat pounded against her eardrums like a war drum summoning her deepest fears. "Just hold on. I'm here." Her mother's voice tried to weave a protective cocoon, but the girl heard the cracks, the faint tremors of uncertainty lurking just beneath the surface. "We're safe." A sudden jolt rocked the plane, shaking them sharply in their seats. The lights steadied momentarily, revealing a creature's shadow against the window, a monstrous silhouette racing alongside the aircraft. The girl's breath caught in her throat as she caught a glimpse of jagged teeth and ravenous eyes glinting in the waning light. "Did you see that?" A voice shouted from somewhere behind them, causing every head to swivel in shared terror. "It's just a trick of the light," someone cried, desperation lacing their words. Yet even this collective attempt to rationalize seemed flimsy, an electric current of fear running through the cabin. Suddenly the cabin filled with shrill alarms, shrieking to life, drowning out the scattered conversations. "Alert! Alert!" The sound warred with the growls, a nightmarish symphony accompanied by a haunting melody of fear. "Prepare for descent," echoed through the intercom, an urgent command rooted in panic. The former pilot grasped the control panel tightly, his knuckles white as they all felt the plane begin to tilt. The girl squeezed her mother's hand, the warmth now an anchor amidst the deepening cold. "Something is wrong," the man with flying experience shouted from the cockpit. "Get us out of here." The former pilot's voice was an explosion of authority mixed with raw terror. But as the reality of the descent gripped them, another howl from beyond pierced the cabin, raising the hair on the back of everyone's necks. A terrible realization washed over the girl. Whatever was below them wasn't done. With the cabin lights flickering out once more, plunging them into darkness again, a true echo of despair sunk in. The alarms ceased, leaving only the sound of their frantic breaths and the silence that followed. Then, the growl returned closer, more visceral. It crashed against the walls of the cabin, shaking them all to their core. Just then, the girl felt a sharp tug on her other arm. Someone. She turned to see a figure moving, frantic, eyes wild. It was the woman with the pink blanket. In that moment, she whispered, "It's coming. We have to go now." Fear twisted around the girl's insides, a chokehold of what lay outside looming, hungry, waiting. "Where?" she gasped, as the figure turned toward the exit, a path shrouded in shadows. "Anywhere but here," and with that, the girl hesitated, fighting the urge to follow. The shadow called to her, a dreadful temptation mingling with the instinct for survival. What awaited beyond the cabin doors? In that moment, the growl morphed into a roar that rattled their bones, shaking the very essence of fear deep in her heart. But as they prepared to follow the call of the unknown, would they run towards salvation or straight into the jaws of something far worse? The darkness pressed heavily against the plane, the cabin still shrouded in chaos. The girl barely breathed, her fingers clutching her mother's hand like a lifeline. Around them, fear mutated into raw panic, the air thick with cries and pleas. Yet, regardless of the turmoil, something stirred. Hope began to flicker again like a candle flickering against an overwhelming storm. "Everyone, listen." The former pilot re-emerged, his voice steady. "Trust your instincts. We need to keep moving." Behind him, the cockpit door opened wide, revealing chaos but also chance. "I can help." The girl heard a voice claim as a crew member pushed in behind him, ready to assist. The girl's mother turned to her, her expression etched with determination. "We have to trust them, sweetheart. We can't hesitate now." But the questions twisted in the girl's mind. What did trust mean during such terrifying uncertainty? Would they fly into the jaws of a beast, or could they conquer the monster together? The thought haunted her, a swirl of fear and possibility. Just then, the plane jolted violently again. Casualties fell, and gasps filled the air, a concert of dread. The girl squeezed her mother's hand tighter, their hearts synchronized in a rhythm of terror and defiance. "We can't give in. We can make it," the former pilot shouted over the screaming alarms. "Hold on, everyone. We're preparing for emergency maneuvers." Each word cracked through the noise, igniting a flicker of courage amidst the disarray. The girl could feel it, the palpable camaraderie growing like an ember through the cabin. Everyone, the former pilot rallied again. We're going to work on a descent together. Buckle up. After the descent, we'll search for the exit and evacuate if needed. The lights flickered once more, dancing ominously, casting fragmented shadows that leapt from face to face, expressions of fear slowly morphing into determination. I'll help keep everyone calm, her mother said, her voice becoming a beacon as she turned to their fellow passengers, her resolve palpable. Just breathe with me. We can do this together. The girl watched her mother, filled with a warmth that surged against the icy grip of dread. Everyone, take a deep breath, her mother encouraged. In and out. The rhythmic breathing echoed a chorus of solidarity. Between gasps and breaths, the girl felt the tension releasing, drawing strength from the collective hope within the cabin. Next to them, the frantic energy of passengers softened as they listened, focusing momentarily on the woman guiding them amidst the chaos. Together, the breaths swelled, a beautiful melody of survival rising against the oppressive fear. The plane shuddered violently. Just then, the snarling growl rose again from the depths, a reminder that something terrible lurked. Keep breathing, keep calm, the girl's mother repeated, urgency threading through her voice. Then, without warning, as the cabin grew eerily quiet, the machine trembled once more. They felt the plane begin to tilt. The descent had begun. Here we go, the pilot shouted from the cockpit, urgency enveloping his voice. Hold on tight. Prepare for impact. With every second that passed, they could feel the pull of gravity, the looming shadows beyond the thinning hull of the plane. In that moment, the girl braced herself. Mom, I love you, she shouted amidst the whirlwind of sound crashing into their ears. I love you too, sweetheart. Always. The words hung in the air like a lifeline, wrapping around them as if heralding hope amidst the despair. The shadows clawed at them, but they faced it together. And then impact. It came with a violent roar, and the cabin erupted into chaos once more, bodies thrown mercilessly against what remained of safety. But in the aftermath, as silence reclaimed the space, the girl felt the warmth of bodies around her. She could hear the soft breaths, feel the connections pulling them into a fragile web. They had braved together the worst of it, and they survived. As consciousness ebbed and flowed like the tide. She felt hands touching hers, the hands of those who fought beside her. Is everyone okay? She heard a voice murmur, reverberating through the lingering haze. A flicker of light returned, illuminating faces filled with relief, gratitude, and joy. They had emerged from their shadow. Together, the girl looked around, and in that moment, she knew. Even through their shared trauma, they had faced down something dark and come out alive. They clung to one another, a community forged in chaos, a family rediscovered through fear. Let us get off this plane, she whispered, determination thrumming through her veins. Together, they helped each other steady and move forward, toward that opening where the light beckoned, vulnerable yet beautiful, in the echoes of their survival. The past whispered softly within them, a reminder of the darkness they conquered. And with newfound strength, they stepped away from the edge, into the embrace of the dawn awaiting them on the ground. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss any exclusive stories that could change your world. This is the moment to show your support for the channel. Your likes help fuel the magic. Smash that like button now. Flood the comments section with your thoughts and theories about this wild ending. What would you have done differently? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Every action counts. Let us keep this incredible community strong.